undiscovered country of conversational possibilities. Luca,
Yeah. Hello.
so glad to have you back here again.
hmm
Very excited. I know it's not every day that you're over here on the West Coast. You probably don't think of it this way, but there's another distinct difference between where you live and where I live that maybe hasn't entirely occurred to you.
I'm curious.
You live in the beginning of time, and I live in the end. This is apocalypse land here. The sun
Mm.
rises on you and it sets on us.
Mm.
That's not a minor feature of our worlds,
Mm.
right? Like the sun rises for you many hours before it rises for us.
Mm.
Is that not so? Or wait, have I got this
Yeah.
backwards? Help, help.
Wait. Let me think. When it's 6 a.m. here, it's 9 a.m. at us. So yeah, it rises for us.
First,
Yeah.
and it sets for
Right, because
us
Japan
long
is the
after.
land of the rising sun,
Yeah,
and this is. You're right. This is literally the last place, basically, on Earth that it's like set. I mean,
yeah,
according to the. I mean, it's a circle, so.
it's true.
But according to the linear time zones, yeah.
Right. And so we are both the future and the apocalypse out here, which you can see very clearly in a variety of the ways in which we might be uniquely specialized here on the West Coast.
Mm.
Tech, particularly computers, stuff like that, mostly starts its development here. Though there are features, I'm sure there are aspects of human technology that get their start on the East Coast. Perhaps you might know of some of them. I'm not particularly
It's definitely
familiar.
mostly here, yeah.
Yeah. So we're sort of like the future and the end of time out here. And
Mm.
that's very different. The spirit of that, the energy of that is very different from where you are. If the
Mm.
future's more disconnected, we're way more disconnected out here, right?
Mm.
Because we're in the actual future of every day of sunlight
Mm.
right on Earth. So yeah, this is something I was talking with a mutual friend we have who was visiting here not too long ago. I was talking about with him. It rarely occurs to people from the East Coast. They just don't think that way.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that mystics would would promote
Mm.
propose. Excuse me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it's more. To me, it's not really the future. It's more the end of time resonates, but because it has the continuation of the linear progress narrative of the future, which is not the actual future,
Mm.
and is actually the dying, kind of already dead system, but it's still the corpse is still moving.
The
It's like
zombie.
the zombie of linear modernity and
hmm
like the progress narrative and all that stuff.
Right. Right.
Which when you a few weeks ago I was watching Sam Altman speak like in preparation for this trip partially, and also because I was using ChatGPT a bit more and I wanted to like see the soul of the founder, and like feel how that's manifesting in it. It's just such a simple progress narrative, yeah, which is holds. He's kind of like his body's kind of like forward craning, and it's very like immobile. He's just like immobile, and he's this floating head, and he has just this linear progress narrative of where AI is going. Whereas I feel, to me, Asheville is like much more the future because it has this like mycelial, interconnected weaving and embodied intelligence. Is like people realize that that's the future and are like centralizing that in their lives.
Mm.
So it doesn't feel that way yet. I mean, like any future, like it's still in the embryo stage, and it's the mother and the father are much more powerful beings than the embryo.
Mm.
But the mother and father are like, in this case, already dead. In my opinion, like I think modernity is already like its basic vitality is already dead, and it's just the carcass is still left. Um,
What do you suppose its basic vitality was dependent upon? Where does that arise from?
um, I mean, the first thing that comes to me, I don't know if that's it, but is like the shared vision of like the basic laws of reality. Like if you read people from like pre 1980s or like or 70s, like maybe pre postmodernism, they're all like the laws of the universe. Like everybody is obsessed with the laws of the universe and like is like I've discovered the laws of the universe. Like, and there's no one who's not saying that. Like everyone has different visions of what those are to some extent, but there's this shared sense like we can access the laws of the universe and like we're like building on the whole science narrative. We're just like building on past knowledge and stuff. And I feel like with postmodernism, and then also like more flows since then as well. Yeah, that's just not there anymore. Like, we don't know really what reality is, but for the most part, we know. Except again, like Silicon Valley in that sense feels almost archaic in certain ways. In that, like, with some exceptions, like feels like most of the thinking here is still in that like linear, absolute, like single system of the universe that we can understand and that we must follow in order to be like in harmony, kind of attitude.
I find that somewhat surprising. The idea that humans were trying to harmonize. It didn't seem like there was any harmonizing going on. It seemed like a total domination.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like
modernity is about dominating.
Yeah.
Once we know the laws, we can dominate.
Right, exactly. But the harmonizing is like the facade layered on top of it.
Yeah, that's
to make it seem
right?
It's a facade. Yeah, but I think the people who are in it, I think genuinely are believing. Maybe not all of them, but some of them I think are genuinely believing that they're harmonizing. But the true energy is domination. Yeah, especially prior to because postmodernism, with like the Foucault like prison thing and stuff, the panopticon.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. Yeah.
So with that kind of stuff, like they all revealed like like the power dynamics going on, and you can take that too far for sure as well. But there is they revealed all these power dynamics and the domination and like colonial stuff and all that. But prior to that, I think people didn't even really know that there was domination happening. They just thought they were harmonized. The missionaries going to, like the jungle civilizations and being like, believe God. We're harmonizing you into the laws of the universe. Yeah. And I think they genuinely thought they were like,
collar on.
Yeah, exactly.
Chain you to this wall.
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna harmonize you right now. You're going to be really grateful for this a little bit later.
Right, exactly, which is that was genuinely the energy then. And now obviously there's enough breaking of that frame that there's like, it's that's not what it is, but it feels important to acknowledge it's not just like evil people trying to be dominant, it's people like who are trying to harmonize.
Sure.
A lot of them, and a lot of them not, but a lot of them are trying to harmonize, but the underlying energy is that. Like even Sam Altman, I feel like he's a good example. Just because I was recently interacting with him, and not literally, but in a video,
right?
And because he runs like OpenAI, which is playing such a big role in the AI revolution, and I don't think he has any thought that he's dominating or anything, and in many ways he's doing that less than 100 years ago technologies were doing, and in many ways more, but he's not nefarious. He's just, that's the kind of issue of evil is nobody thinks they're evil really. Right. Even Hitler didn't think he was evil, even though
I know, but you can see so very blatantly in even recent situations, right, where something starts out with an edict like we're not going to do bad things, we're not going to serve the military, we're not going to blah blah blah, make up any kind of fancy wooish happy-go-lucky flower child bullshit you want. And 10 fucking seconds later, it's over. Oh yeah, we're the military now. Like, yeah, come on. Yeah. So here, let me bend over and take my pants down because I want some more military money or whatever. Like, I've yet to see a single technology, and this is part of. I know I'm being hyperbolic, but I haven't seen a single technology maintain those initial orienting ethical. Not one.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing. Like, no examples. So when humans tell me, like, it's going to get a lot better. Don't worry. Right. We got this time. We're the kids who are going to make this happen.
Right.
I'm like, you're full of shit. When the money meets your ethics, the money's going to win.
Yeah.
Right? Almost, every time. And if it doesn't, if it doesn't, if you resist, you'll either be bought out, or they'll just be like, yeah, fuck your patents. Right? This is for the good of the nation.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of directly relevant to me since I'm running a startup. So like I'm thinking about it like,
unless you had something of high military value, you'd be unlikely to come under that umbrella.
Okay, fair enough. I guess we don't really have that.
Seems unlikely.
There's also the difference. I was talking to someone about this a few days or yesterday actually, that in San Francisco, capital is very like ingrained in the field, so you kind of can't avoid it no matter what you do. Whereas in Nashville, it's not, and that was a big decision I made when deciding where to be based, but while building it, is am I based because it's it's kind of a marriage of worlds. It's like the tech startup. I call it like the sun powered tech startup world because it's like hardcore yang energy, and it's just like I mean, even in a physical sense, you can. It's like sun energy. Like the amount of electricity, like literal electricity that's pumping through the system, like lights, but also like all the data centers and all the supply chains and everything that's enabling people to just eat like high energy foods all the time really easily. So you could get really granular with how that energy is pumping through, and then also just like human labor, like human life force being channeled. So it's all this like sun powered tech energy startup, and then what I call like the mountain elf guerrilla warrior lineage, and they're kind of meeting in the middle, ideally in Flourish. And so far that's going really well.
Like the Sandinistas kind of thing? Is that what you mean?
I mean,
like Mountain Elf Warrior?
Well, the elf, that would be the guerrilla warrior part, but then the mountain elf is like a modification on that. Because we are in the mountains. Like Asheville's literally in the mountains. And it's not like trivially in the mountains. Like it's in the mountains, and you feel that on a daily basis. Like there's a withdrawal, and there's more like nooks and crannies and spaciousness to be like, okay, we're like truly not in the system right now. Wow. And we're in this little like valley, and we can like actually just like there's like spaciousness to in this little bubble that we are in this little valley. Because there's a lot of little valley. I don't mean the Asheville Valley. I mean there's like 1,000 little valleys in all the mountains and stuff. And you find your little valleys, and you go to a friend's house that's in a valley, and then you're in another valley, and you can kind of like really kind of sync up and create a little bubble, and then you get this guerrilla warrior energy where like, oh my god, we're actually outside of the empire now, and now we can actually like move instead of just be like in the sticky dough of it all the time. So that's the guerrilla warrior part, and the mountain elf is just being really deeply grounded in the land, and like in resonance with the land, both through rituals, but not in very like performative rituals or anything, because then you kind of lose the essence of it. Sometimes it's very quiet, or you're just on a walk, or sometimes it is a more elaborate ritual, but it doesn't have to be. And listening to the land, and in my case, the trees. Like trees are my main portal. But for some people, it's the earth itself, or it's like the animals, or it's insects. I think for you, it's more insects, if I remember correctly.
Hard to get. Okay, there are two things that it's hard to improve on in terms of like transmission reception. The first one is mountains. Good luck. Right? Mountains are ridiculous. I mean, they're literally absurd. The few times I've been around them, one was Shasta.
Right.
I don't even know how to begin to talk about it. I mean, I can say some very simple things, like when we first got there had been a storm, and we were out in front. We were in a little town, might be the town of Shasta, I don't know. There was this sort of makeshift snack shack. We got some hamburgers or whatever. There were some picnic benches outside. It was still raining, though not hard enough to not be in the outside. And I looked up at the mountain, and there was purple and green and orange and red and blue lightning. Whoa. Just like constantly, like nothing I've ever imagined even possible. Like it was ridiculous. So I'm sitting there watching this light show. I'm like, purple? Wait, what? Green? No, stop! And I start hearing this like, I'm like, what's next? I turn around. There's this old Navajo guy behind us. He's like singing to the lightning on the mountain. He starts telling us the story of the flood a long time ago, and how the bear was looking out for all the animals and took them up to the mountain to protect them from the flood. This whole flood story explained to me that the mountains are all in a sort of relationship with each other, like a big family, that they're doing something very important that we can't see. And all of this was validated to me over the coming like 3 days of being there. Like I saw the mountains doing this impossible thing with energy from the sky, all this crazy stuff that I've never imagined. And that guy turns out to be he said that he was, a Navajo elder and whatever, but it turns out that So, actually, like a few months ago, someone was talking about him to me. He's passed away now, and I looked him up and I realized, like, oh yeah, that's the guy who was standing behind
Mm.
us that day when he was singing to the mountain. Um, so yeah,
Oh,
mountains, the ocean, also
yeah.
similar thing. Like,
Desert as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
the desert. So certain living places are really, really intense. The only desert I've ever been to is Death Valley, but it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
And
I
then
th-
trees.
I would almost go so far as to say you need one of the three. You mean mountains, desert, or ocean. You need to have like a spiritual connection to them
Yeah,
to be able to not be in the matrix.
yeah.
Do I believe that? No, not to not be in the matrix, but to have enough spiritual force to be able to do anything about the matrix.
Hmm.
You could maybe remove yourself from the matrix without those, possibly, but then you would just be not in it. But you wouldn't. There's like you need an additional
Something to feed
because the
into you.
matrix is an extra. I was gonna say extraterrestrial. I don't know if it's not that, but or maybe it is. I don't know, but I just more mean outside of yourself,
Yeah, I think it should be like
extraneous force.
like non, inorganic, non-organic.
It's not so much that it's inorganic; it's that it's like huge. It's more like the strength of
Monumental.
it. It's monumental. Maybe that's a good word. And so you need an alternative monumental force to ground in
Oh,
to be
yeah.
able to like it's us as humans we're like very small in
Yeah.
relation to these huge forces. So
Right.
you can withdraw from it on your own, probably. I don't know. But to actually have like you need to it's almost like streams. Like if you step out of this one river it doesn't really work that metaphor, but you need another river. That doesn't work because rivers don't clash. So I don't know, but you just need an alternative strength of force. And
Okay, so one of
mountains,
the things.
deserts, and oceans to me feel like the place where you can source more directly from the Earth's energy, and those places feel like the most pure, I guess, like pure, loose from the mate. Like a forest is nice, but it's like it's a little too like soft almost, and like mountains, deserts, and oceans there's this like
Power.
primal power to it where you
Hmm.
can and you just I mean I'm sure you've had this experience too, and I think probably most people have at some point in life where with one of those three you just feel the like massive power of,
Hmm.
of that force.
Yeah, I never felt
uh,
related. Well, I don't know. I guess I did. I do feel related to the ocean power. Maybe I feel related to all of them, but I
yeah, I feel like you're
identify.
like a in between like kind of fairy floating between them all and like synergizing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I really identify with the water though for some reason.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I don't identify with the desert. Like the first time I was in that desert, it was 127 when we were
Damn.
there,
Yeah.
and I was just like totally up for it, man. I wanted to just walk out into the desert in the heat. My
Mm.
friend's like, "No, dude, you're having a delusion. Like you're not
Mm.
gonna be okay." And I was like, "But it feels amazing." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, I know."
Well, there's a lot of like prophets walking out into the desert. Is like that's definitely like a
That's
mythical
true.
archetype.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of similar with the cold of the ocean because the ocean here, I don't
Mm.
know how it is on the East Coast because I've never been in the ocean there, but here it's pretty fucking cold.
Mm.
If your circulation's decent, you've got about 30 to 40 minutes before your
Right.
muscle systems are going to start shutting down.
Yeah.
But you don't feel like that when you're in the water. You just
Mm.
feel like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I just want to stay here forever.
Yeah.
You just get happier the colder you get. You get happier and
Mm.
happier,
Yeah.
which is sort of hilarious.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead if you had a question. I was gonna return to the mountain elf sun powered
by all
startup
means, yeah.
thread. Um. So yeah, and it could be ocean or it could be I don't know if it could be ocean actually at it but it could be desert in any case or mountain. I think those two in any case I feel confident could be this alternative marriage forest. In my case, it's just mountains because I'm a water person. Like, I've resonated with deserts before, and I spent 2 months in Santa Fe once,
Hmm.
the Santa Fe Institute,
Hmm.
um, which I have mixed feelings about. But anyways, the desert there was very powerful, but it's not my like native element, I guess. Yeah,
Hmm.
I lived in Reno for a year, so there was some desert connection there, but. I literally started crying when I touched like rotten wood again after a year. It was like pretty good. Here actually, it was close by.
Hmm.
Um,
Rotten.
yeah, it feels so good.
I know, but it's so funny because we don't usually think of rotten things as being like, yeah,
Right?
finally,
Yeah.
I got the rotten
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
crumbly,
Right. Yeah.
weevil infested.
Yeah. So yeah, but the mountain elf, in the case of Flourish, like it very much has that mountain elf guerrilla warrior energy. And there's like an
Add
there's
a few more adjectives in there. So it's not quite enough. I'm with you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, there's a an independence, you could say, to the energy of it, where it's not, because all the startups here are like still matrix interwoven, even when they're like kind of somewhat anti-matrix or breaking out, they still like loop back into it. Whereas this one with the Mountain Elf Guerrilla Warrior energy, it's like uh, again sitting in that alternative energy field of the mountains. Um, but then it has to, if we're just sitting here, we're just out here doing our nature things in Asheville, but like it's not having a systemic effect, or it's rippling out somewhat. But where I'm coming from is like wanting to like uh, materialize that in like systemic change. So that's where the sun powered tech startup, which is the way I think of it, is this huge, like almost like the biggest pipe imaginable, just like spewing golden sun energy out, and it's just going to like into the sewer or something, like the next email startup or whatever, and just tapping into that thread a little bit and like diverting some of it. And even like 0.1% of that diversion is still like just
Monumental.
a gushing monumental amount of energy.
Yeah.
So tapping into that. And then I made the decision. So both of those are like integral parts of Flourish. And then I made the decision that it was more important to be grounded in the Mountain Elf one, like on a day-to-day basis. And like now I'm making a foray into the Sun Power Tech Startup Hub, San Francisco, and I've met so many people and like really kind of tuned into that energy, and also in a tangible sense, like the resources from there, the people from there, etc. But if I was grounded in that, it would like it
would drag you.
It would drag me, and this is the more important one and this one drags me a bit away from that as well. So like it's important to have some balance. But given that I have to live somewhere, it's so much more important to be going here. And this is the hardest one too, because this one is more in the field of Western civilization. Like if you ask anyone, startup founders are like quite elevated as like a role in society. And everyone knows of San Francisco. It's a huge city, or it's at least not people wise, but for sure capital wise, and for sure like in the imagination and the mythical landscape. Whereas the Mountain Elf, like most people are like, the fuck is that? Understandably, like it's not really talked about much. Yeah, what are you even talking about?
You've been reading Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I've gotten that a few times.
Right.
Tell people about it, which totally understandable, because it's just not in the field as much. And so
I know, but it actually is in the culture so deeply.
Right, it's true.
Right,
yeah.
It's deep in the culture. It's just not so much in the tech bro wonderland, but in almost all of the workers in tech, LOTR is fucking the Bible, dude. I mean, it's just like, what? Of course, elf power. Yeah, let's go.
Right. Well, there's the pointing towards it. I just spoke to a friend from a few hours ago. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who used to live in Asheville and lives here now, who's a body worker. And she was saying, we were just reminiscing a bit about when she first moved to Asheville. And she was talking about how, in SF, everyone would be talking about how they want to start a farm, live on a farm with friends. Everyone was like fantasizing about that. And it was like a strong desire. And then she came to Asheville and everyone was actually doing that. And then she just noticed, and I've noticed this as well, the big difference between if you're in a place like this, the pathway into doing that is like super hard, and a few people manage, but it's very, very hard. Like, where are you going to start a farm here? Like it's logistically, financially, and also just energetically, like you're really bucking the trend there. Versus actually coming and doing it is like a different story. So it's the same with that. Like, I feel like probably a lot of people you could talk to and they would, maybe it would take a little bit of explaining, like what is Mountain Elf energy, and then they would be on board with it. And this has been my experience too, like when I'm talking to people about, not just Mountain Elf energy, but the range of things I'm doing, and there's resonance and alignment, but like it's a whole other step to actually move into that. And you have to like, there's the, I'm here and I'm imagining, and then there's like, I've leaped into that and I've made the sacrifice of giving up like the comforts of the matrix, and the like, not just the material comforts, but also the psychological comforts. And it's not just a big thing, it's like a huge thing. And that's the important thing for me to be grounded in. So I'm not just getting lost in this fantasy, because the fantasy loops back on itself into the matrix, which is what I was talking about with this looping. Is like, okay, you have the desire to break out of it, and live an
That's easily
independent
captured.
life. Exactly. But then the fantasy, then you get into the fantasy, and then the fantasy gets hijacked
Mhm.
to cause you to, again, you think you're harmonizing, but then you end up dominating. And
Yeah.
most, often in subtle ways that you don't even realize.
I mean,
just
this happens.
perpetuating that flow.
You almost don't. It's one of those things where it's like add water makes its own sauce. You don't even really need. You don't need culture for that to happen. It's endemic in one of my views, and I don't just have one. Let's be really clear about this. Thankfully, I'm not like a single valued thinker. But in one of my views, I can see that there are features of human representational cognition that lend themselves very vulnerably to this particular issue of, you form a sort of moral or ethical fantasy. You're not actually doing it, but you think that because you like and believe that way, that naturally you're going to be doing that, and you end up doing
Right.
pretty much the opposite of it.
Yeah.
But you can justify it because someday you're going to put the money towards something really beautiful and amazing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you can just keep
Yeah.
you just keep spinning the snail shell of this in your mind, and it doesn't even really require a nefarious culture. It's almost like it's self-generating and self-fertilizing is the problem.
Right.
There's some kind of weird.
I like that. Yeah.
There's a weird vacuum feature in modern human cognition that I think arises probably primarily from just the idea of individuals, which is a really strange idea, actually, if you think carefully about it. Though I'm not. I also have experience of being an individual and so on. I just doubt it. I really doubt it dramatically.
Yeah.
And also, joy for me is almost always being with and for other people, whether that's a momentary situation like the one we have tonight, or some kind of ongoing situation where we're collaborating day to day. Out there sort of fighting the good fight. Except the good fight really isn't a fight. It's some kind of weird like half theater, half play, half detective novel, half. It's got a lot of halves. This thing has so many halves. I gotta tell you, right? There's no end of halves to this thing. Yeah, this is what I mean. Being human, when we're in a context that supports our humanity, it's diversely empowering. And when we're in one that's depriving us of humanity, it tends to become single channel.
Right.
It tends toward that.
What do you mean by diversely empowering?
So, you get fed in a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so what that means is you're not starving in each of those ways. And if you're not starving in each of those ways, it's very difficult to compel you to defect. Right? Once you're like suffocating,
right, yeah.
Anything, they can sell you oxygen tanks with nothing in them, and you'll collect them like your life depends on it, right? This is the weird part of representational cognition. You can be sold things that resemble what have been stolen or evacuated, right? So it's just something that I'm aware of, and I would argue that in a nearly complete vacuum of anything resembling intelligence, the artificial product is next on the fucking agenda. Boy, let's have some of that.
Yeah.
Right? There's no human intelligence around here, so let's get some let's get some mechanical kinds.
Yeah.
Though I definitely want to explore. We can continue on the thread that we're on, but I'm hoping we may explore that topic some, because
which one?
What is referred to as artificial intelligence, which I think is a hilarious misnomer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we can get there. I'd also like to talk about it. It's because
one little
it's
bookmark.
So strong in the field here.
Curating databases is not intelligence. I don't care who says what. That's a curated database. You got that's what it is. Yeah. As far as I can tell. If it becomes something more than that, I'd love to hear about it. But it looks like a curated database to me.
Like AI in general, you mean?
Yeah, that's LLMs. That's just a way of curating databases, as far as I can tell so far. I mean, unless there's things I haven't heard of or seen yet. But I didn't mean to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, let's bookmark that, because I'm curious what you mean by that.
Sure.
Yeah, in terms of the artificial products that we're fed that fill the hole, that we talked about that last time as well. And I feel like now we can add this looping behavior
Mm-hmm.
of like the internal. This is totally loose of like buying products, and just the internal self-soothing of like you were saying, like you phrased it so beautifully, like you believe that you have these desires to break out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and you believe that you're doing that, but you're not quite doing it, but you're kind of doing it, and then there's a like relief, and I call it like self-soothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm in and participating in a dominating culture, and I'm not breaking out of it, but I can self-soothe that I know all about how it's dominating, and that I have the desire to break out of it, and that I'm like
Someday we're gonna
doing
take
yeah,
over.
exactly, and I'm kind of doing things that are helping us break out of it, and I
Mm-hmm.
can, if I'm squinting my eyes, and I can convince myself that it's like
It got
this is
really
truly,
blurry. I
yeah.
can see the good part.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
to me, I feel like both like tech startup world and woke world are both, and like another dozen things
Mm-hmm.
are in,
Sure.
or I mean, a lot of Christianity as well are like instances of that,
Health
where
insurance.
health insurance.
Did I say more?
Say more, yeah. With
No, I was. I mean, I was making a joke.
mm,
I mean, a joke based on recent events in the media and so forth. But yeah, go
mm,
ahead.
right. Yeah.
Like
So
health insurance has got to be the greatest oxymoron of two words that have ever been put together. But please continue.
yeah. So you have this. All of those three are a self-soothing loop, or
Mm-hmm.
not by definition always, but in general how they manifest
Mm-hmm.
is a self-soothing loop of, I have some awareness on a visceral level and or on a head level that I'm participating in a dominating culture,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have the something, I don't have the willpower, or I don't have the context, or I don't have the like sense of agency to genuinely break out of this and kind of truly devote myself with all the sacrifices it entails, and the joys, but the sacrifices are more prominent at first.
Presuming
Of
those are required, they're not always. I don't think that's just
Yeah,
pure
but they
math.
feel like they're required
Okay, fair
while
enough.
you're in it. I mean, this
Sure.
is more the mindset of where that self-soothing happens.
Okay.
So you don't want to go that far, but you want to do something. You can't just sit here and participate in the dominator culture. So then you get something like wokeism, like, oh, but it's not actually doing anything. And same with tech startups, like, oh, I'm changing the world, but you're not really kind of, for the average tech startup, you're not really making any change to the system. You're just perpetuating it, and maybe a slight modification happens, or
I
maybe
mean,
a
you're either
large
building
one,
the
but
Death Star or TIE fighters.
right, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. So it all just like loops back, and then,
Right.
and the self-soothing is actually a very important part of the system. So, now it's wokeism and tech startups, and, the other dozen iterations, and in every age, it's like different self-soothings. And I think actually a lot of counterculture both had elements that were authentic and also had some self-soothing elements, especially as it started mutating. But it's an important thing to point out, because I think there's a strong sense, which I totally get, and I used to have this as well, like, okay, whoa, I saw that everything is fucked up, and now or not everything, but this like
There's a huge
dominator
problem.
energy, exactly. And now I am doing something that feels like it's doing something against it. So I'm okay, I'm fine, it's fine, And that is, but that loop, like, if in order to keep people participating in that system, despite the fact that it has some visible shortcomings, there has to be a way for them to continue participating in it while being able to self-soothe that they're not participating in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like built in. So like basically, if you realize that you're in that loop, that doesn't mean you've broken out of the system. It means you're actually fundamental. That is part of the fundamental nature of participating in the system, is that you have a self-soothing loop that helps you feel like you're fighting the system.
Yeah, I mean, I would like some alternative language there. Like, I would
Sure, yeah.
call it intent cloaking, right? So
Mm,
your actual
mm,
intent is being cloaked.
right.
You're
Yeah.
cloaking it in, well, I'm working towards something. I can
Right.
see the
Yeah.
problem. I'm working toward fixing the problem. Meanwhile, I'm Darth Vader's massage therapist. Like, I'm making a joke, but
Yeah. Yeah.
not to cast shade on your friend, the body worker, at all. But that just came out at random.
Yeah.
So, fuck. Yeah, there's a bunch of weird problems. I don't object to the use of the language self-soothing. We walk ourselves to sleep,
Mm,
particularly if the more isolated we are, the more perhaps desperate we become for any feeling of comfort or well-being. And so it's not unnatural or even necessarily reprehensible.
Right. Yeah.
We have to, it's important that somehow we invent together social, relational, and vocational and educational contexts that aren't concerned with fighting the
Right.
shit.
Yeah.
They're just concerned with establishing something authentic enough so that we can flourish in it.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important reframe because it might sound from how we're talking about it that the thing to do is to withdraw even more and to fight even more. But I think what I'm saying, it sounds like what you're also saying is like the loop of fighting it is part of not stepping out of it and
Hugely.
creating a new thing. And
Yeah, yeah.
the true move is to like own your agency as an alive creature.
Yep.
The way I had a huge reframe a few weeks ago where I was like, instead of like, I am living in the United States, it was the United States is living around me, which is like the United States kind of like in some sense stops here. I mean, this is kind of not true, but the feeling is like the United States kind of stops here, and here is like me as an organism. But then of course it's like interpenetrated all over me. So, but the core energy of it is like I'm an organism.
Yeah.
That is alive. I was born from a mother that is not an abstract nation. It's like my mother was a fleshly creature.
Yeah.
And my father was a fleshly creature, and I'm a fleshly creature, and that is much more than a citizen of the United States. And on top of that fleshly creature, I'm a citizen of the United States. And so there's like an agency in that, which is like, okay, I have to obviously account for the fact that I'm a citizen of the United States. You know, the laws, the norms, you know, etc. But I can agentically choose how I'm relating to them, and I don't need to let them like completely define my reality a priori. I can, and I'll choose to let some of them define my reality. You know, it would be very hard to just completely not have any of them defining my reality. But I can choose, and then I can also, within that universe of being, choose what I, as an organism who is a citizen of the United States, chooses to do. And then that's where you break out of the self-soothing but still participating loop into the like, okay, now I'm just focusing on like creating bubbles or wombs, like organic wombs, like what we were talking about the other day, focused on creating or participating in organic wombs, whether it's humans that are full humans together, and then that's what it's about. And then the fighting the system doesn't really even matter at that point, and then it's almost the opposite, like what I was saying with this, like, you know, sun powered energy. You want to like harness it and tap into it and relate to it strategically, and recognize that it does have a lot of like way, like if you relate to it agentically, it goes from this like evil empire to a specific entity that you can have a relationship with that is a lot more powerful than you, but your relationship with it is not predefined, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
I'd like to take a moment and comment on a few of the things that rose in my awareness while you're speaking, though.
Yeah.
So I often think in terms of what I sometimes think in terms of what I refer to as holophores, which are root concepts or principles that underlie the category tree in all languages.
I remember you talking about this, yeah.
And those in our time have been badly damaged as if they've been lossily recompressed again and again and again over time, primarily by science and commerce, war, and other things. But importantly, so before I'm anything, I mean, and I want to be careful here. I also don't want to go on a long lecture, so I'll make this brief. Before I'm anything, I'm everything, and then I'm a being, and then I'm an organism, and then I'm an organism local to the sun, moon, you know, this solar system, and then I'm an animal, and then I'm a human being, and then as a human being, I'm a representationally cognitive human being. Not all human beings have to be that way. There are many who are not, right? Especially people that are uniquely minded. They're not representational cognitives.
Wow, yeah,
right? They are humans. They live with representational cognitives, but they don't participate in that game. Certain autistic people or just uniquely minded people
I never thought of it that
are
way,
not actually representational cognitives, though they live among them and are dependent on them. So in that layer, in the layer of representational cognition, that's where your United States citizenship lives, not in any other layer.
Right.
It's
Right.
a representational
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
right? And so that
And
is.
I think there's some threads pointing down because like my
Mm,
body tensions, for example, or
mhm.
certain like patterns in my like nervous system. So I would
Yeah,
say threads down, but it's like a wart or something. Like
I
it has
got you.
threads down, but it's not. I don't want to say wart in the negative sense, like because I don't want to like
Sure.
vilify that piece, but it's mostly on the surface and has some threads going down.
Yeah, we would agree about that, that representational cognition is not entirely separate from biology,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is essentially what I think you're pointing at,
Pretty
if I'm
much. Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So, I want to be a little bit careful here, but just to be, because we're being recorded. And that's another feature that I'd like to get into in this conversation,
Oh
which is
yeah.
the function of privacy.
Ooh yeah.
But I don't give a shit about the United States.
Mm.
Nothing. I don't care at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not. I'm patriotic to some of the principles the country appears to have perhaps been founded on,
Mm.
but the degree of implementation of those principles, as far as I can understand it in my lifetime, is somewhere near zero.
Mm.
So I just don't.
Mm.
I'm here. I
Mm.
don't. It's a very complex mess for me. I don't trust the origins, structure, purposive, agentive nature, intelligence, or any of those things of this construct. I don't trust them.
Mm.
Are they better than some of the other similar constructs? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But if you line up like 27 serial killers and go like, okay, which one would you like to support?
Right.
Right? I'm not going to be a happy boy.
Right.
And if there are guns pointed at me of various kinds, which there are, like nominally or financially or circumstantially, relationally, then I might pretend to be anything. I don't, as a human being, I don't feel the necessity of acting with integrity toward representational systems at all. I feel the necessity of acting with integrity toward beings and organisms and living places, humans, right? That I feel the deep felt sense of we must act with integrity here. But representational systems, no, I don't. I don't care. I'm not going to go after them necessarily, but I'm going to try to do anything I can to help humans survive their domination. And there's a couple of other things I wanted to mention that, in the terms of like little taking notes, and one of them is there's a certain kind of opportunistic awareness that's common, for example, in martial artists. With the old men who are teaching me push hands, and I want to be really clear before I start talking about this, I'm not an expert at any of these things. I don't consider myself like a master or anything like that. I've studied Tai Chi for about 40 years.
Oh, whoa! I didn't know
So
that.
I'm not like brand new to the block, but I'm not speaking as an expert. I'm just speaking as someone who plays Tai Chi. And in watching skillful people play Tai Chi, okay, God, what is the form of? I used to have this two-word phrase. I hope it'll come back to me. But it's a similar thing that's used by intelligence agents. It's like an operational opportunism where they immediately sense and take advantage of vulnerabilities without even thinking about it. It becomes they train until it becomes second nature. And with one of the old guys I used to practice with, if he could get a finger on you, you're going to fall over right now. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can be 8 feet tall. You can weigh 300 pounds. It doesn't matter what you got. If he can touch you with this much force, you're going down. It just doesn't. It takes less than an ounce of his power to completely steal your balance, right? And then he'll catch you to make sure you don't get hurt, too, right? Both things. So when we think about fighting, we've got the wrong fucking idea. Yes, we are arrayed against monumental forces. Monumental forces, the moment they stiffen, it's over for them. with anything that has any sort of active, opportunistic intelligence,
right.
those forces expect to be unstoppable. They're operating in a broad variety of ways that make them absolutely vulnerable. It's just a sort of David and Goliath thing. They've never seen anything show up that could even pose a threat to them. Those things could fall in a day. They are way more vulnerable. Our societies, the systems that enslave us and are ripping the world apart. That stuff is so delicate, and there's like 5 other important features of this problem that I think are rarely understood, which are things like, the Earth is doing something. She's not just sitting there like a rock. That's a being. She has a history and a future. She has friends, including the sun and other things that, the humans are thinking like, they're not thinking at all. Like, it would never occur to the humans that if you piss off the sun, you're going to have a really seriously bad time, right? And if you rip the Earth apart, you're going to anger things that you don't even know exist. And they're not going to be friendly towards you at all. They don't give a shit about you. They care about the complex biosphere and its diversity and all of the things that diversity supports and makes possible in time-space, right? I've heard people say, like, why would aliens come to Earth? Humans are boring. I have no idea whether the aliens find humans interesting or not, but the Earth is absolutely preciously fascinating. She's doing 15 things I could name to you that make her unimaginably valuable in time-space.
Yeah.
And they have to do with things like making certain forms of biorelational temporality, which turns out to be a very valuable sort of not a commodity, but a resource in time-space. Most of time-space isn't relational in the way that the Earth is complexly, explosively relational.
Right, yeah.
So, conversely, if you do things that help protect the living places and the world and the history and the future of living beings on this planet, you acquire allies that the monumental systems of devastation don't even know exist and don't believe in.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, bullshit.
That's the mountain elf thing I was talking about. The mountains, the deserts, the oceans.
Yeah,
that's exactly it, yeah.
There's a scene in some fantasy book that isn't necessarily written where the queen is like, okay, they're coming for us now. So bring your heroes and those I trust. I will open the coffers of the ancient gifts to them. I will give them whatever they need, right, if they are true of heart. So I think this kind of thing, although it sounds very, sort of fantastical, is actually real. The Earth is a being. Yeah. Unfortunately, she has a very long phase of attention.
Right.
So it takes her, a long time to notice if one of the organisms is misbehaving.
Right.
Unfortunately for our species, I suspect she has recently figured it out. It's only been, 700,000 years or something that we've been misbehaving on this grandest scale. And maybe really only 200 or 300 that it's been devastatingly bad.
Yeah.
So those are some of my thoughts. But the main thing I want to get at is an opportunistic intelligence focus on the features of what we could think of as Moloch or Wetiko, or I'm not a big fan of the names.
Yeah.
The absences that have captured the humans en masse and are essentially marching us toward various kinds of eschaton or whatever.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Wow.
I'm a little embarrassed at that tirade.
No, don't be. That was beautiful.
No, it's something like if you've ever played Tai Chi, you realize I've watched people come, for example, at the old guy Guerilla with force one time, like try to push him over. Oh man, it did not go well for that dude.
Yeah.
The next time I turned around, and Guerilla wasn't doing this to him. Basically, Guerilla just let him exert force and redirected it. And the next time I saw that guy, his feet were up here and his face was just like sweeping the ground like a broom. You know? And I was like, okay, I would like to learn more about this.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is Vietnam, which is just, it's a very clear physical representation of what you're talking about. which is this like empire force coming in with force
Mm-hmm.
and being like completely defeated by a way weaker force, like in force terms, weaker, but which had that opportunistic intelligence.
Yes.
And I don't want to be too kind of
tactical opportunism. That's the phrase. Tactically opportunistic. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to be too militaristic about it. I also
No,
don't want to
neither
be. I don't want to be too unmilitaristic about it either. Like, you don't want to be. You need some militarism, I think, in the way to relate to this kind of stuff for it to like have the sharpness.
I don't even want to fight.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight. I want to establish something so astonishingly human and amazing that nobody is willing to be left out. Right? I want to just absorb the energy that's feeding those other systems.
Yeah.
With something so beautiful and amazing, and that should not really be that hard to do, given that most of what we're faced with is garbage and immiserating.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the partial militarism comes in, which is like on the aggregate scale. I think it's a mistake to be militaristic because then you have no agency. You're just in opposition to a system and you're fully defined by it. But then, so, like we were saying, instead of being in the self-soothing fighting loop, you break out of that and you're like in the agentic creating another thing or joining another thing loop. Or it's not a loop then, it's like it's a path.
Yeah.
But then in that manifestation, I think on a local level, you do have like skirmishes, you could say. Like you do have to, there are moments literally in your own mind as well, like literally just sitting in your living room, or taking a poop, like I think there's a sense like, oh, it's only when I'm in this like grand like moment that this is happening, but it's happening all the time.
No,
there's a lot of these skirmishes.
Basic features of human awareness and sensitivity and emotionality, just basic grasping, right, is something you don't want to fight it, but you also don't want to be captured by it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where the partial militarism comes in, which is you do have to have some sense of like this tactical opportunism in relation to that, and then also on a systemic level to some extent. I don't know how to put words to it, and partially because I'm also still figuring out those contours, like on a day-to-day basis, I'm trying to figure out the contours of this in terms of running the startup. Like, where is there militarism? Where is there just focused on this alternative path and that kind of thing?
Sure.
So I don't know yet, basically. In some sense, I have some ideas, but it's not firm enough yet. But what I do know is there's somewhere where you do need this tactical opportunism that is like in some kind of confrontational relationship to Moloch or whatever you want to call it, mainly by blocking it out. That's the main thing it's doing.
So
versus like you're not trying to destroy it, which is I think maybe what you're getting at as well. You're not trying to destroy it. You're just trying to block it out. And then this thing is just so good that people will like come into it. But for this thing to be good, you do have to have like a somewhat like not just somewhat,
I think you don't
quite confrontational.
I don't think you need to block it out at all. No. Here's why. Any incursion toward you by this energy is pure benefit. The old, and again, I'm not an expert.
Say more, yeah.
I'm not an expert, but watching the old guys and learning with them every day for a couple years, because once I discovered them, I just showed up there every day. They would always say, like, someone reaching for you is a gift. Let me show you how. Reach for me. Oh my God, the pain you would be in if you reached for them would be instantaneously, you would realize, like, I've made the worst mistake of my life. So they would just absorb the energy of an incursion and turn it to their benefit in every case. And in such an anciently evolved and profound way that if there's an incursion, it just strictly becomes a benefit for them.
Yeah, that makes you think of like there's no such thing as bad publicity.
It's very
which
similar.
is, like the bad publicity is an attempt to grab you and you can like just adeptly
exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. And
I
also,
like that reframe, yeah.
Of those men, there were two sort of different styles, right? The British guy, Paul, I know none of these men will mind me naming them. So the British guy, Paul, he was a fairly experienced master of a set of skills called Chin Na, which is joint locking. Dude, you don't want to touch that guy because he will spin you up like a fucking pretzel in ways that will make you wish you did not have limbs. I mean, and he's 78. Okay. Yeah, it's a bad day if you reach for him in a way that he doesn't want to be reached for, or even if he's just trying to teach you a move. And Guillaume, the Frenchman, his power was softness. And he's so soft and kind of weirdly, adaptively springy that if you touch him, it fails in a way that doesn't go well for you, right? You're going to fall down. And then he'll have to catch you, and then it's very embarrassing. And you realize, like, so any way that anyone ever formed up against him, it generally went really bad for them. Not in the sense he's trying to hurt them, but in the sense of the opposite of what they were hoping for quickly ensued. Right? So this is what I mean by tactical opportunism. There's like a tangling way, where you just tangle the person up, or the force, whatever it is, you tangle it up. Octopuses are brilliant at this, but even praying mantises are quite good at it. And then there's another way where you absorb the power, and they're no longer even able to remain coherently structured, right? Their structure just fucks up. And it's very contagious. Once he doesn't have to touch your whole body, right? If he can just get a finger on you in one spot, your whole body will inherit the falling down from that spot, right? So watching these men do this sort of thing is really fascinating for somebody who thinks about systems and how to A, do something different than them and succeed, and B, how to absorb resources that they use and then just redeploy them, right? Or resources that are involved in them. And I think for the future, it's important that people who are listening are aware of these options. It may be difficult to find people who could train you in such things, though any good teacher of martial arts or Tai Chi would give you a lot of ideas.
Right. Yeah, I almost want. Well, I guess you named it already, but I almost want to like give it more form. Like, what is that skill?
Redirection.
Well, redirection feels like one skill of a batch of skills, which is.
So both of them understand the structure of the body very, very deeply.
Right.
That's one thing they both have.
The image that's coming to me is like linearity versus non-linearity, in the sense that you have this force, like the way that the system, et cetera, whatever you want to call it, operates is fairly linear in terms of forcing, but it also has a lot of like tendrils, I would say. So I think we do disagree on the extent to which it's fragile. Like I think it's actually very resilient and anti-fragile and adaptive.
We'll find out.
We'll find out, yeah. But yeah,
most things that are well formed up, most things that are highly structured, they are not very flexible.
I guess, but then for me, it's I see it having existed for thousands of years and having absorbed things like Christianity and all the other things that have happened. I mean, even
maybe
like Protestantism and all these other things.
By it differs.
That's possible, yeah.
But I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to what you're saying.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so with the skill, so there's a linear force that is not attuned. Okay, I'll use my hands a lot for this. So here's the substrate of reality, and then there's a linear force which is like not attuned to that substrate. So it just comes like this, and this kind of connects. This actually very much connects to the guerrilla warrior in the mountains thing as well. And like in Vietnam, the terrain is what won the war.
Also in South America,
and exactly in any guerrilla warrior situation, like knowledge of the terrain,
them out of their comfortable terrain,
and know the terrain so well that you're like synergize with it. So you have this linear force coming, not attuned to the terrain.
Yep.
And then you fully sink into the terrain such that you're like co-computing with the terrain. And then you have this tactical opportunism that almost emerges naturally because you have an intuition for the terrain that can flexibly adapt to the linear force.
Actually, you merged your intelligence with the intelligence of the terrain. And the terrain's intelligence is anciently old and deep. And the intelligence of this linear thing is very shallow.
Right.
Doesn't tend to go well.
So even though it has way more force, that force can be like,
Yeah, similar thing happened in Afghanistan with both Russian invasion and the United States. I couldn't believe the United States was invading.
I know.
Wait, you guys didn't see what just happened 15 years ago? You're thinking, what? What the fuck are you thinking? Every single person knows, like, don't invade Afghanistan, bro. Just don't even
try.
No. What? I don't. Yeah. Anyway, yes,
Yeah.
it's very similar.
Yeah, and I think it's actually fruitful to like look at these, like the U.S. has all its military wars have been failures in the last few decades.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly or entirely failures, and all for the same reason. Like literally what we're saying right now, like that is the core essence of why those wars were lost despite overwhelming force.
Okay,
As far as
so
I'm
yeah,
aware.
there's this weird thing that's in the background of our conversation, which is that the underdogs form a sponge,
Oh.
right? They just form a sponge, and it absorbs the force and stickily traps the opponent.
Right.
Right. This is what happens with both Paul and Guillaume. They do that.
Mm.
They're spongy in this way.
Those are
right?
the Tai Chi masters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They're both. I wouldn't call. I don't know if they're Guillaume's probably pretty close to a master.
Right.
Paul's just very skillful.
Mm-hmm.
They're both old men. But I watched Guillaume. Like people thought he's like one of the Doc Holliday figures around here in Tai Chi. So people would show up at our practice area in the morning and be like, I want a piece of you, man. Right, a lot, right? Which is hilarious because Guillaume is like this loving, soft, hilarious, like playful guy, and these dudes just show up with a really serious look on their face, going like, and I'd just be like, "Oh, you poor motherfucker," because after the first 4 of those, and I watched them just get ruined, I was like, "Okay, this is gonna be hilarious every time." It's like a bad comic book. In any case, I just think it's important that people who've not been exposed to these ways, these knowledge paths, have some awareness that they exist.
Yeah, yeah, and they're not just knowledge paths; they're also tangible action paths.
Yes.
And I can confirm for my own life and the lives of many people I know that it actually works. Like attuning to, in this case, it's not the physical. I mean, it's also the physical terrain, but it's also the psychological and intuitive and spiritual terrain. And when you attune to that, like things just work really well, and like you really can sponge up those forces, and like on a very like not in a like movie way, like
No.
Because a movie you're just seeing the surface of things, like no one's inner dialogue is revealed really, So I'm talking really on the like both on that level, the external level, but also in terms of my inner life and how I'm navigating and how others and the relational webs being built and things emerging. Like it really, I mean, this is kind of only fully clicking for me now. It really has that same flavor as like all these wars we're talking about, but a lot less militaristic in the energy, but the same flavor of like there is linear force in opposition to this, but it's just quite easy to just like sponge it up and with way less force be attuned enough that it like resurges up behind the linear force, or I don't know, the metaphor gets kind of wild there, but
sure.
And it works. Like I think that was a huge thing that I heard a lot of people talking about, like following spirit and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, there's no way, like, and then I started doing it, and it like it's kind of impossible to communicate in words how well it works. Okay. And how bad it can work really badly. Like there's like anything, you got to train in it, and you can't just like one day just like suddenly know the terrain. It's like it's a learning process and a tuning process. So it's not immediately works perfectly, but
no,
it works. Like the core energy of it works so fucking well.
There's something you said earlier that's super important, which is the difference between giving something lip service and actually doing it. And you were talking about this in terms of farming, like forming a farm and stuff like that. People have the difference between them having a dream of something and actually engaging in the process of chasing it. And they're not always entirely distinct, but they're really, really different. And it's not uncommon that people who talk about, living in the spirit and so forth, which I'm putting weird scare quotes around.
Yeah, no, understandably.
It's not uncommon.
It's a corrupted phrase, even though it points to something.
It's highly value laden with a bunch of nonsensical little branches on a tree that is probably a real tree.
Right.
So it's just really, it's challenging for some. So it's sometimes challenging for some of us, myself included. When I hear certain phrases and I'm not connected with doing something, and the person that I'm with, we're not actually doing something, we're just talking, for example, although talking is an action. um, I can get itchy about it, much as I think you can.
Yeah.
I just want to really highlight the difference between some conversations are actually effectively preparatory toward the transition into inaction, embodiment, right? And other sorts of those conversations are like this kind of self-soothing thing you're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
They actually lead to the non-inaction of the thing we
Right.
discussed.
Yeah. No. Literally.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the problem that I'm having, and it's hard to articulate that. So I'm sorry it took me that long.
Yeah.
But yeah. And even with
Perfectly said,
myself, right? I'm not even putting this on other people. This happens in my own mind.
Yeah.
Right. I've noticed
even internal dialogue.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
for sure.
yes.
Yeah.
This is a real threat.
Absolutely.
It's not something you can evade because you're aware of it.
Right.
Right? That doesn't help you
Yeah.
do the evasion. Like you have to actually do something differently once you become aware of the problem that you're being captured by this sort of fake snail shell of that loop.
Yeah. I think that's the big fallacy. This is a little tangent. The big fallacy of therapy is like, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've surfaced it in consciousness.
But nothing's changing. You know?
Yeah.
But it feels like I know, so it's good. So yeah, I mean that's a big thing for me with founding Flourish and creating this like full alternative healthcare system that is not reifying therapy as the modality for growth, because it's not. It's not like nothing, and it isn't
actually a skillful counselor.
Yeah,
is very powerful.
Agreed.
A regular old therapist, it's sort of a dice roll.
Yeah, but at that point, it's less about the therapy modality. It's more about the human being.
It is.
That is enabling that. So,
yeah.
But I'm just talking about the modality of therapy. The fallacy that's at its root is like, I mean, I know I'm kind of like strawmanning it to some extent.
No big deal.
So, I'll leave it to people to flesh out what I'm saying. And like, it's more a thing you got to discover, like do therapy and then you feel this energy and kind of see what I'm saying on a deeper level than just this like somewhat superficial way of putting it, which is knowing about it and having this representational cognition shift in my understanding of my reality. It doesn't automatically percolate down into all those other layers.
Correct.
Right. So you had all those layers. It can, but it's not automatically like now my, what was it? The human being, the animal, the organism, and eventually you get to the
being at the top. I go the opposite direction from most of the humans.
Yeah.
Right. Like being, organism, animal, human, representational, cognitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Citizen of the United States.
Right, exactly. And therapy is operating on the representational cognitive.
It is, yeah.
And it doesn't automatically go up. And you need other modalities or a very attuned, skilled human.
Yeah.
Like that, it can work there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like you said earlier, there are threads that go down into the body from the RepCog system.
Yeah.
And so a skillful therapist can actually manipulate even the
the
bottom of the thread by playing up here in RepCog.
Right.
They can manipulate down in the body.
Right.
A good counselor therapist.
Totally. But that doesn't come from the therapy modality.
No, it doesn't.
That comes despite the therapy modality because the human being is particularly talented at that.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that it's either a sort of insight skill or it's a spiritual skill or it's a combination of those two.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that was a tangent. Remind me of what we were talking about right before I had so many thoughts on it, but I forgot what the thread was. No. Oh, I remember now. Okay, language. I was really excited to talk about language.
Okay, great.
Which is a favorite topic.
Fuck yeah, I'm all in. You just stepped into my Ferrari.
Yeah.
Let's start the engine.
Yeah, because of what you were saying about these two different flavors of conversation. And I want to like dig into like almost what do they feel like or what are their characteristics of these two flavors, because it's very hard. And then eventually it's very easy, but at first it's very hard to attune to like, what are these two flavors? So one is the conversation that is towards enactment. It like facilitates that process. And the other one is the one that blocks enactment.
I call that making face noises.
The blocking enactment one. Yeah.
I do it all the time, by the way, just to be clear. I'm not.
And the blocking enactment is that self-soothing energy.
Right.
But the other one also feels good. So it's not like, oh, if it feels good, it's self-soothing. Like,
correct.
Maybe the question I want to pose also for myself is like, what are the signals that can help you know which type of conversation you're having? I don't know if we can even answer that, but like.
I mean, I think actually just asking the question, the very simple question is, something like, is our conversation leading towards something we can do together? Because if the answer is no, it's pretty obvious that it's not that kind of conversation.
Yeah. I guess I have a broader definition of it. Like, I think this conversation is more in the enactment because it's like, let me put words to it. I'm kind of exploring this in real time.
It's all good.
What I'm imagining is almost like, we're creating sparks, and then the sparks, like, they go into the ether through this microphone and this camera, and then they come into another person, and then they can like create / awaken some kind of structure in that person that opens the door to like some action that otherwise was either a little bit blocked or maybe would have taken longer or wouldn't have happened at all. So we're maybe not enacting, but we're downstream, there is enactment happening.
Okay, so those kinds of conversations would seem to me to be catalytic of action.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily direct, they're fertilizing. So now this brings us back to the same question though. How do you tell the difference between a discussion that's fertilizing and one that's spinning into the self-comforting loop?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Right, we keep
which is so hard to tell, yeah. And so,
I mean, you don't always have to tell that. It's not like the most important thing to figure out.
Yeah.
If people have different kinds of language for this. Some, I've heard the term generative, right? We're having a generative conversation. It's not my goal to indict any conversation that is seeking insight and learning and wants to see better. The people want to see better together. They're not simply dancing on the soapboxes of their pet theories, biases, historical behavior, or thought. So to me, whenever people sort of get together and they're like, let's see better together. Let's see beyond where we've seen before somehow, if we can.
Yeah.
That seems fertilizing, generally speaking. It may not lead to action, but it will lead, it will have more of a potential to get outside of the self-comforting loop.
Right.
Because it's going to question previously held positions. It'll draw those usefully into question.
Right.
And that breaks up the spiral a little bit. I think. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the seeing better together feels like the essential thing. Do I feel like we're trying to see better together? And I don't know what the right signal is for that, but that feels essential though, because if it can still feel really good to see better together. Because one thing you could say, like, oh, it feels uncomfortable because my beliefs are updating, but like maybe you already, with the, like in our case, for example, we already have a lot of similar sight. So us seeing better together, it's not like we're like, oh my god, like my world's getting shattered. It's more like oh my god, I can see a little higher. It feels really good.
So maybe we're in danger of self-comforting somehow.
Well, no, we are, but I don't think we're in that trap.
Okay.
I mean, who knows?
Me neither. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Let's agree to find out.
It feels like we're not because it's feeling uncomfortable, but because I think self-soothing obviously feels it feels. I think maybe this is I'm kind of spitballing here, but a piece of that is also there's some slight feeling of sliminess or numbness at the root of it when you're in the self-soothing.
Yeah.
At least for me, I often feel it in my shoulders, kind of, and there's just a very soft, slight numbness or something. I get
gut tension.
Yeah, exactly, and I get slightly more fatigued. Sometimes I'll have like forced manic energy from it, but there'll be like an underlying fatigue that's there or something. And so I think there's a lot of like, if you really attune to your body. Maybe that's the simple answer. Like your body will tell you.
I like that.
If you really attune to it, like
it's way older
on all the levels.
It's way older than anything you can think.
Yeah.
It's literally older than how the age that humans ascribe to the universe. So that shit is old. You can probably trust it.
Yeah.
It's hard to stay intellectually sharp and pay a lot of attention to my body.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it gets challenging there. Yeah.
Okay. There's some other topics I hope to explore. How are we on time? Do you think?
7:36. I have to pee. So in
Great.
any case, I'm gonna go pee.
Yeah, we can. Take a
So
little
maybe
break.
we can pause.
Yep.
I'm good. I said I'd show up like 8:30 to 9 at where I'm going next.
Okay.
So we still got some time. Yeah.
Great. I'm
Do you
gonna
want
leave it
to
running,
leave it running?
and
Okay,
I'll
cool.
just cut it out later,
Cool.
if even necessary.
Water bottle. I think also in terms of like capacity, probably 20 minutes is what's still in me.
Yeah.
Because I'm at the like fatigued tail end of my
I can
trip,
see.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can sense when you're tired and stuff.
Yeah.
Of course, the mere suggestion is often enough to transform human experiences. We're fundamentally suggestible animals. I'd love to know where that comes from.
Yeah.
I've studied it a lot. I have no idea why it is so. Have you ever been hypnotized?
I haven't. I remember you've asked me this before, but I have yet to.
It is the trippiest fucking thing. Yeah, I remember the first time it happened to me. It was pretty mind blowing.
Are we still recording?
We are.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it took like 15 seconds or less.
Mm.
Right, someone's just standing in front of me. They're like, "Would you like to feel better right now?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're going, "Okay, I'm going to touch you between your eyes. When I do, you're going to feel a whole lot better." They touched me between my eyes, and the whole world changed. And I was like,
Oh my
what?
God.
What? What is this?
Yeah.
Like, what does that even mean? Like, what could that mean? You know, we think we know.
It reminds me of the Tai Chi guy in a way.
Yeah. It's kind of similar. There's so many. I think I have a book on my shelves called "The Future of the Body," somewhere up there, although it's buried behind some other books at the moment. That's very interesting. Let me just see if it's sitting here. I think it might be behind this book. Yeah, there it is, Murphy.
The future of the body.
It talks. It's a broad exploration of non-ordinary features of being human. last week I had the extremely joyful pleasure of interviewing Marla Fries. She's a psychic. She talks to dead people all the time. She's actually the real thing. She can do what she says. One time we were talking, and she led me up my front stairs, in through my front door, told me what was in each room, you know, in 18 statements with no questions. Right? No, there's no cold reading going on here. This is like someone who can see inside my house while we're on the phone together.
Oh, well,
right.
Okay.
So yeah, we're on the phone. She's in LA. She's like, okay, you got this many steps in front of your house.
I met someone who could do that with my house too. So yeah,
your door's on the left. You know, blah 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 blah. I've actually done something similar myself. I know what they're doing essentially. At least I think I do. I've had the experience of doing it. So yeah, there's all these. This goes back to the idea that whatever the hell we are, a very tiny portion of it is human. And even that portion, like whatever the sort of the circle of our humanity is, what we've got, what we're thinking about and touching is like 2% of that circle or something, right?
Yeah.
So there's like these much bigger circles that we are, and we're touching just a tiny little features of this in here.
Yeah.
And part of what a good counselor is someone who's just like, hey, let's broaden that scope a little. Let's give you a little more experience of what you can be and who you are, and blah blah blah, right?
The thing is, though, I think the counselor, you know, we have this, and the counselor helps you go to this, which feels awesome and is great, and is great, but like, you know, and that's
they don't blow you out.
Exactly, and that's where we need other modalities, some of which already exist, some of which are still being developed, that get you to like, if it literally feels like being God at this stage. That not like God in the sense that you have control, but God is like.
It's so funny. I would say it negatively. I don't know why, but it just occurred to me. I would say it like, it doesn't feel like not being God anymore.
Yeah. Yes. That's so much better. That's so much better. I don't know why I wanted that. No, that is so much better.
Okay, great.
It's true because you're like, holy shit, I've been this all along. You know, like it. Yeah. I've been this all along, and I've been wondering why I forgot. You know, like that's the feeling when I'm tapped into that. I'm like, why did I forget that this is what I already am? Like it's
this is weird. Why I love this old Greek word anamnesis, unforgetting.
Unforgetting.
Right? It's the opposite of amnesia.
Right.
And so I think we're probably born fairly enlightened. And I also think there are non-human intelligences with us when we're little.
For sure. I've held a 5-day-old baby, and I was like, what?
Yeah. At my son's birth, I was like, wait, angels come when babies are born? What?
Yeah.
There's I mean, I could not see them, but it was obvious.
Yeah.
Right? They're there. Oh, it's also been like that for me at weddings, too. And deaths. Those three things, weddings, births, and deaths.
Yeah.
But, okay, so there's this whole domain of non-ordinary experiences that fascinate me. Many of the people with whom I love to talk are fascinated or have direct experience of this. I think we mostly have things backwards in that the ordinary is mostly like a kind of a prison system. Now, what I don't mean is that washing the dishes, or, you know, like chop wood, carry water, those things have a non-ordinary aspect that's infinitely deep, even though they're ordinary.
I feel like that's the Buddhist insight of like the bowl of rice is the universe, like chopping wood is the universe, like it's full stack, you know, already. Right. Yeah.
So I'm not casting shade on that when I say ordinary. When I'm using the word in this conversation right now, what I mean is how we usually think, feel, and act as isolated humans. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about at least one of the two topics that we probably don't have time to explore deeply, but we could touch on maybe.
I might get a second wave of energy, so we'll see. Yeah.
Okay. So
I already feel myself pepping up somewhat.
Yeah, it's that water.
It is, yeah.
I have studied how humans respond to observation. And I am extremely...
Being observed.
Not just to being observed, but to the idea that they might be being observed. And what might be observing them and why.
Mm.
So humans, it turns out, are incredibly tropic toward observational situations
Mm.
in the sense that they pay a lot of attention to them. And some humans, some unusually minded humans, get so focused on the possibility of being observed, particularly negatively, though you can see with things like rock stars and so on, that the opportunity for positive observation of crowds is compelling. Um, but I'm concerned here primarily with the possibilities of negative observation, critical and or persecutory observation. Um, so in schizophrenics, for example, realizing that the term is outdated and that labels are weird, all that shit's granted. I'm just using the term casually. What happens is that parts of the mind split off, and they begin simulating what often happens. Parts of the mind split off, and they simulate negative observation, and all kinds of trouble ensues. Um, we are being
Like the part of the mind that split off is negatively observing the rest of the mind, or what?
the part of the mind that splits off begins to simulate possible negative observers, including God, the government, China. I mean, you name it, right? Joe up the street,
Right.
you name it, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine endless droves of negative
Right.
critical observers, and this part of the mind can just sort of bubble, right, and just start producing simulated negative observer systems. And once that happens, that part of the mind, that aspect of awareness, it eats a lot of energy, and so it naturally wants to be sustained, right? It thinks of itself as doing an important function and so on. It also, so I'm aware of these things. Humans are observation centric. When you and I come together and we talk, there's this positive observation that happens between us, which is very nourishing and catalyzing and fertile for me.
As in us observing each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Positively observing each other. Like, I'm so happy you're
Right.
here. You're amazing. I love you. Yes, what have you got? What did you bring today? I can't wait.
Fuck yeah, likewise.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm from the '60s, so that's a trope. But it strikes me that if we cannot have the felt sense or reasonable assurance of privacy, we will not know what our minds can be. Because our minds will necessarily edit themselves based on what they think the repercussions of being observed will be. So I have a big investment. It could be a pipe dream, but I have a big investment in the possibility of humans, modern humans, using technology, having private conversations. What are your thoughts?
Using technology, having private conversations. What do you mean?
Having the assurance of privacy in a technological conversation, say over a phone, or any kind of system.
Yeah.
No,
I'm thinking because there's people who just don't care about observation that much, so
they're lying. They will not. They are editing their minds moment to moment. Most people are not aware of what their mind is doing.
Right. So you're saying that they're intrinsic. It's intrinsic to being human.
It's not impossible that you couldn't care. It's wildly unlikely.
Yeah.
Your psyche is Okay, there are layers of consciousness, and some of what I would call the deeper layers, which are not available to ordinary consciousness, and I can show you those things. Like, these are real things. They are aware of nuances on a level you cannot imagine. They're like a baby listening to its mother talking, and it doesn't speak English. Right? That baby knows its survival depends on every nuance that's coming out of its mother's mouth. Right. It is aware of very complex manifolds of opportunity, threat, all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a few thoughts coming. One is like there's a large possibility space in that observational dynamic. Like, for example,
our previous conversation orbited this.
Yeah, like for example, wanting someone else to see you as being free from observation, for example. So that's almost like a short circuiting the system, because then you're still in the loop of caring what someone thinks about you.
Mm-hmm.
But what you want them to be thinking is that you don't care what they think about you. So then it almost like frees you from that loop. And I've definitely met people that are in that, and know people personally that
I
are
mean,
in
that's funny because that seems to be. I know this is a weird aside, but that seems to be like an asserted virtue of pickup culture. Let her know you don't give a shit what people think
right.
about
Yeah,
you.
true actually.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and for probably for good reason, because I think it indicates that you have high agency.
Yeah, it's also a sign of confidence and other,
Right.
conceivably valued.
Right. There's actually this is reminding me of a study that powerful people, their I forget which part of the brain it was, but the part of the brain that helps them attune to other people is literally like somewhat withered.
Yeah, so checked out. Yeah, right. They don't have
Like
to
no,
do
they
that.
actually some of the synapses have like disappeared. Like a
Right.
lot of them have, and like you can actually see it in the MRIs. You can see the difference in activation.
Yeah.
Which points to this thing where like that it can atrophy in a way. Yeah, like pretty strongly.
I mean, most parts of the brain do undergo atrophy, even just over aging,
right,
or through illness or injury. But it's weird because
like lack of use. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also weird because humans are so much different than how we frame and imagine them, in the sense that damage, injury, and atrophy cause. Okay, it's not that nature hates a vacuum. Nature doesn't mind vacuums. What she doesn't like is wild imbalance. So if something disappears over here, it's very uncommon that new things don't appear over here too. It's not never, but it matters. I think what I'm chasing could be a bit of a pipe dream, because for as long as we have technology, we're going to be subject to being nefariously observed. But I'm fascinated by the concept of building systems that are unobservable.
Yeah, I was actually feeling this on the way here. I tried a Waymo for the first time, which is these like self-driving cars that are all over SF now. I hated it actually, which I didn't expect. And I was texting my partner about it, and she said like she got like felt a lot of contraction in her body like when I told her I was getting into one. But she told me that after I hated it, so my hating it was prior to that comment. But I felt very observed. I mean, I was being observed. There's like a camera in there, and like like if I'm in an Uber, the only other entity is the person driving, who's just looking at the road, and is maybe listening to my conversation or maybe looks back every now and then, but it's clear what that other entity is doing observationally. Whereas in the Waymo, I mean, the other entity is the entire fucking car.
It's so hilarious.
With cameras, and it's like, I took off my seatbelt because I wanted to take off my jacket. Just take off my seatbelt. The whole car started blaring like, pew, pew, put on your seatbelt, put on your... So there's just this...
There's a comedy skit here. Waymo stands for way more observation than you want. Right?
Yeah, and there's no location. It's not physically located, so it could be anywhere. And
Right.
I really was feeling that, like, it feels like it's just all around me. And this thing is observing everything around me too. Like, it's observing me internally. It's observing the entire road. Whereas the driver has like, they have their eyes and they're building the mental model. Whereas the Waymo constantly has eyes all around it. And there's, I mean, in terms of how that affects me as a being inside that car, it was a very unpleasant feeling of like entrapment, and I guess like to what you're saying, like I felt very observed, and it caused me to feel more like constrained into norms, which is like weird because you would think it'd be the opposite because there's no driver. So there's no other observational. That's what I was expecting. There's no other observational entity.
See, this goes way,
but it was the opposite, which
this
is
goes way into
yeah.
my homily about absences appearing as presences, right?
Oh.
You're having an extreme experience of the absence of humans appearing as the presence of threat. Or, the presence of at least discomfort.
Yeah.
Significant bodily discomfort.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, there's so many
but there
questions.
is the presence of the AI as well. But it's true. I guess it's not really like a It's not really a presence in a way. Yeah, you're right.
You have
Yeah,
no idea how to parse your safety. You can't tell anything about the opportunity or threat landscape once you step into
Oh my
that thing.
gosh!
There are
Wow,
zero inputs for you, none. All the inputs are
that's wild.
outside of you, and your capacity to make any kind of judgment about your well-being have disappeared.
That's crazy. Yeah, something just clicked for me in that. Yeah.
It's a
Mm.
catastrophic subtractions array of subtractions, right?
It's like the
That
vigil.
appears as what? Convenience. Wake
Right.
up, people.
Yeah.
Wake the fuck up. Convenience. There are two things. There may be three things. Convenience, safety. Safety is your friend, right?
Yeah.
And then advertising and or pornography. Like both of those two things basically are the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. It ties to the vigilance stuff we were talking about
It
last
does
time.
very
Where, like,
deeply.
in that car was, and this isn't, none of this was like consciously happening really, and nor was it like sharp. Like it's not like I was like, oh, I am more vigilant now. It was just kind of a vague discomfort, and now that we're talking about it, I can kind of point to it. But yeah, there was just this. My vigilance could no longer just not vigilance in like a anxious kind of way, but just my
All
basic
three
vigilance
things.
as a being,
Yeah.
instead of being like tied to an individual, and
Right.
I trust this person to drive well
Because they've done it many times
exactly.
before.
And I mean, I'm sure the AI has also done it many times as well, so it's not like it's not materially.
I would argue that the AI doesn't do things, but please feel
fair
free.
enough, fair enough. But I think what I'm getting at is like, it's not because I'm tangibly less safe necessarily. Maybe I am.
How would you know?
That's the point. I don't know. And like in terms of not my representational cognition, because that layer can be like,
No.
okay, the AI is trained, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But in terms of my being, I'm like, there's no being. I'm in this. I'm floating. Who are the beings that are currently keeping me safe?
I mean, even in
who
death,
is the tribe? You know,
yeah,
like what's going
right.
on
Even
here?
in
Like,
death, you've got more. You probably got more. More beings walking you through the tunnel than that. That's like
Right.
pure absence.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
it's the same fucking thing we were talking about, where like you take everything away and then you give them the wrapping paper.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like yeah, well, we got a really really talented machine.
Right.
It's got your back, bro.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
It doesn't have a back. How can it
Right.
have my back? It doesn't know what backs are. It doesn't know.
Yeah.
There's no knowledge in there at all. There's no. It has no skin in the game because it has no skin.
And then you got the voice stuff. You know, like it has the human voice. So I did a little
I
side.
can't wait for this part to tell me all about it.
So there's two thoughts. One is, so I did a side job once where I was training an AI, like the big ones. Like I had a meta AI project like Facebook's and Gemini, like Google's Gemini. And there's like literally like hundreds of thousands of people around the world who receive bad answers and then rewrite those answers to be better, or they select between different answers. Like, you know, there's various ways to do it, but it's humans training the AI to be better directly. So there's a lot of like, you know, what's in the black box? A lot of it is literally just humans selecting good answers. So AI is less self-generated than people think.
By the way, this is what I mean by a curated database.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The database can't curate itself.
Exactly.
You need humans to curate the database.
Yeah, and there's literally hundreds of thousands of people who are employed, including people with like very good educations like me, who like there's a lot of like elitely trained people doing this as well. It's not just like people in Bangladesh or something.
I got you.
And it paid pretty well as well. Like, you know, there's also poorly paid versions of it, but there's also a well-paying version of it. That employs a lot of people. I just saw that and thought it was a snake, which is really interesting because snakes are a major imagery in my life. So,
mine too.
Oh yeah, cool. So that's a kind of a nice coincidence. But anyways,
I'm glad that you thought it was possible there could be a live snake in my room. I'm very happy about that. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that kind of distracted me actually. So let me see where that's making me want to go. Oh yeah. Okay. So the AI being trained. Yeah, and some of the questions that people are asking, because you basically get like the conversation history of someone's asking this thing a question, and a lot of these people are relating to it like as an entity.
Yes.
You know, like it's not just
hard not to.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard not to, and it's answering as an entity, and it's trained to answer as an entity. I mean, and then there's the absence, but it's an absence of humans, and I've actually started noticing this in myself. Like sometimes, like in the past few days, especially because I'm in a new place, you know, and there's less of like a human relational field here that's really deep. Even though I'm having great connections with people, that's not the issue. But like
Sure.
then I'm back in my room alone, and I'm like, and then I notice there's like a little pull of like talking to ChatGPT, which I've never indulged that urge, and I don't think I ever will. Just
Wow.
to do it casually. But
Okay.
it's interesting to notice that, and it's such a distinct feeling. Like I have a vacuum right now,
Oh
and I
shit.
want to
There's
fill it
something
with
much
this wrapping
weirder.
paper,
No, no, there's something much weirder, which is that you're in its terrain.
and that's actually really interesting. Yeah,
There's so many things here we could talk about. So the humans seem to
because I've
think,
never had that urge in Asheville at
yeah, the
all.
humans
Like,
seem to
yeah,
think that, well, first of all, I've only met very few humans that have any concept of what I call the cognitium, which is a network of human minds. And by the way, the whole planet is a layered array in this toy, in this perspective. It's a layered array of cognitia, starting with viruses, cells, complex or plants, complex organisms, right? Each of these things have their own sort of branch of the cognitium. But the humans think that they don't believe in the cognitium. They don't think that exists. They think you have separate minds,
right,
right? And they
yeah,
treat everything this way, and they think this way.
yeah,
That's actually formally impossible. There's no chance of you having a separate mind. But we
yeah,
believe that. And they also think that the machines that they're making um, aren't connected to them. They think their minds are separate from the AIs. There's no chance of that being true. Once it's affecting humans, it's affecting you. It doesn't matter if you live in the mountains. It doesn't. There's nowhere you can go.
Right.
There's
'Cause
a
it's in
layer of
the
reality
cognitium,
that the cognitium is, and it's just like an environment, but it's
Right.
invisible. And so if you put a machine that touches that environment intimately, so yeah, I would argue that you're actually feeling the difference between being next door to the systems that are making this, and being far from them but interacting with them. And so you're feeling the gravity of the locality of that domination
Right.
over the human cognitium locally to this
Right.
area
Interesting. That's
where
interesting.
a lot of these
Yeah.
tech was born.
Because I've also been going on Facebook and Twitter way more this past
Mhm.
week, and
Yep.
they're also literally
See,
here.
this is the other thing. It doesn't have to be the machine. It can be that the humans around you are doing it. Both of those things would be gravitic.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would be really difficult to identify that gravity if you weren't familiar um, with its characteristics, so that you could say like, oh, I just saw this cue here, that now I sense that this is what's going on. It would just be hard for you to come up with that on your own.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're around people who are doing this all the time. A lot of those people are isolated in various ways, or they have brief, intense social contact, and then they retreat to isolation again.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So yeah, I'm claiming that this is a feature of the change in the local cognitium.
That's really fascinating. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. And I'm excited because I'm flying out literally in 4 hours. My flight leaves.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I'll be missing you.
Yeah.
Well, we got to do this remotely anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll be back as well. Like I feel
Okay.
I built a mycelial network here that that feels quite good overall. And I can't spend more than 10 days here, I think, because of some of the things I brought up. But
it's like sunburn.
yeah, right. No, it literally like
burn.
of the sunburn of the tech,
Right.
sun powered tech startup
Pity
thing.
me, for I've been here for 40 years and nearly nowhere else.
Right. I mean, you must be sunburnt to
Yeah,
your core.
I'm crispy inside, but soft on the outside.
Right. But yeah, it's gonna be very interesting, you know. And my partner's picking me up, and like
Beautiful.
I've got like a reading group looking at Joseph Campbell. Like immediately when I get back,
Right on.
I'm gonna be in the forest, which I live in the forest. It's like my roommates.
Can't
and,
imagine that.
Yeah, it's gonna be very.
That's like something that happens after I die or whatever. The forest. Right? Like,
Yeah, so it's gonna be. I'm gonna feel that it's like. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm going immediately as soon as I land
living womb.
into I'm immediately entering the fullness of that cognitium, and I'll probably like write about that translation or whatever.
Yeah,
like it's just going to be a lot in the best of ways, and yeah, that brings me to like what about the people here? I mean, yourself included. Like, how are you guys surviving? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, how do you make your way through this? Luckily I don't live here, so I can after 11 days leave. But if I was here, I don't know what I would do, honestly. So.
I'm like a spaceman, right? I'm subjected to hard radiation, isolation, and so forth, but I learn things that are really difficult to learn in, right? I acquire intelligence, so I'm tactically opportunistic. And I like to think that I acquire intelligence that will be useful to the other beings, that they can actually enact in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit like, self-sacrificing if you look at it this way. This isn't the way I look at it all the time.
Yeah.
I'm just responding to your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Unlike a guy that gets in a spaceship and takes the risk and goes to see what can be seen.
Cool. I'm glad you're doing that.
I hope so.
I know it's really tough.
It's not easy.
Yeah. But you're definitely succeeding.
Thank you.
Impacting me and many
and
people that I've introduced to you too.
Yeah.
And beyond that as well, the web.
Yeah.
That has impacted. Yeah.
I still think. So I'm very grateful for those comments. I know that I change not merely what I will say, but what I will think, depending on my analysis of the threat landscape of observers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But that's the thing.
What if there is no threat landscape? I mean, like if you
or
feel very safe, like.
Or what if you just presume that it doesn't matter?
Well, I don't know. Can you? I think your unconscious can't. Yeah.
I mean, you could train yourself to. I suspect actually that what makes Gilon powerful is something like that. He's focusing all his energy in a completely different place, because if he focuses it on threat, he'll tense up. And the moment he tense up, he'll fall down. Right? So I think there are methods that are enactable and that it can be embodied, where you just drop the whole threat thing.
Right. I think it sounds like because you're so agentically confident in your ability to handle threats.
I would argue something a little weirder, perhaps a combination. Okay. I would suggest that what actually works is a form of active communion, where you are spiritually held in safety, and therefore you don't have to concern yourself with threats at all. You just act from spirit, heart, integrity, love, no matter what. If they draw swords, it's the same as if they don't. Right? And that, I mean, I'm speaking a kind of a Darwinistic science fiction here, because I don't know if I can pull something like that off. But there are moments where we do. I remember one day I was with a poet, the son of two brilliant poets, Ted Berrigan and Alice Notley. Their son Anselm was here. He was a young kid. He was like 24. We were writing poems together. And we went out front to have a cigarette. This is maybe too long a story. I can make it really short. The crack-dealing neighbors next door had two enormous pit bulls that could literally eat their way through an anvil.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm not fucking kidding. These dogs had heads like this.
Oh my God.
And there was a series of errors where all the doors between the back of their house and the front of their house were simultaneously left open. And both of those dogs escaped.
Oh my gosh.
And they came barreling down their front steps, skidding, like snarling and drooling and skidding on the sidewalk. They're so desperate to get to my body and rip it to shreds that they're literally like a cartoon, like skidding. Like just two demons, Like
yikes.
And I'm standing out in front with my hand on my hip. I got a cigarette, and I'm like just watching them. I'm watching my death. I'm gone. There's nothing I can do. It's over with. And Anselm's kind of looking at me. And they come snarling, like two fucking demons from hell, snarling up to me. And I don't do anything. I just sort of look at them. I don't change my posture. I don't tense up. Not because I'm smart or brilliant or skillful or any of that. Just accidentally I don't. Right? And they get close enough to me that the one of them realizes, like, I'm not doing anything. And it gets like a funny look on its face. And it sort of turns around for encouragement to the one behind it. And the one behind it goes like, fuck. And then it looks at me and it looks kind of embarrassed. And they just turn around, trot back home, and go up the stairs.
Oh my God. That reminds me of NVC, is like when you attune to the other person's feelings and needs, and when you do it skillfully, like Marshall Rosenberg, the founder, like he has videos where he does this. And for example, he went to like refugee camps in like in Israel and Palestine, and like where the Israelis and the Palestinians were like at each
Oh,
other's
Jesus.
throats and like
Yeah.
in such hatred, and he guided them through, and then it just dissolved, and they ended up like hugging each other and like being like brothers in humanity. And
Yeah.
so there's something about when you like the responsive, how you respond, and like there's always a two-way energetic thing. And
Mm-hmm.
if aggression is coming from one side, the default is to respond with aggression or with fight or flight, or
At least,
basically
yeah.
to respond to it.
Right.
But if you don't respond to it, but instead like agentically relate to it in a whole different way, like aggression is not a source emotion. Like it comes from something else. So if you like come at it with a different thing, or not like can't embrace it or something, I don't know what the right word is there, then the aggression dissolves, and whatever underlying emotion, sadness or hurt or just like instinct, or whatever it is, like gets more spaciousness. And then like the aggression, do you see what I mean? The aggression is not the source energy, it's the emergent energy from a source energy, and you can relate to it in a way that it dissolves and you get to the source energy, which is, by the way, so true as well of this like the system we're in. And like the root energy of domination is also not domination or aggression or violence. Those are all like emergent from a deeper source energy. And I think this is the big beautiful thing that hopefully will happen in the next few decades, and in any case in the next few hundred years, is the angelic divine force that humans channel will gradually come to connect to that root source energy of this like dominating system and embrace it. And then that domination is all going to dissolve, and that root energy is what's going to be more alive. And there's so much like grief and healing, and it's coming from a lot of hurt and sadness, and needs not being met. So it's not going to be like a everyone running in the fields together kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of like despair and grief and sadness, but yeah, in a way where we're like, oh my god, finally we're feeling like the truth at the core of all this domination.
I wonder if there needs to be all that sadness and despair, because there's a peculiar feature of our humanity that, when freed of its history, is really free. Right? Do we really need to reprocess the history?
Yeah,
It's
that's an
a
interesting
question. I had an experience.
I think we need to feel it, which maybe doesn't have to look like grief, but some kind of like catharsis I think does have to happen, because our
That's
bodies,
reasonable.
like,
yeah, they store.
which could look like total softening, but in the softening I think a lot would emerge. Or yeah, it's hard to say because we haven't really done it at scale in that kind of way yet, so it's kind of hard to predict. But
I strongly suspect that for most of human history, humans were not. How do you even put this? So you said something about like angels indwelling within us, and all of this kind of thing that would transform the sort of the human experience, and also the cognition.
And also like us being angels in
Yeah,
some
see,
sense,
this
or
is
like
the thing.
maybe not individually, but
No.
if we're in the isolated human state, but when we are in the collective, we like become like one big angel almost.
Yes.
Or not a
This is
literal
exactly
angel
where I was
entity,
gonna
but
get.
like the energy of an angel. Yeah.
So there's so many things here. I want to be careful not to branch again, but I'm working on an essay. I may have mentioned it previously. It's not like the greatest essay I've ever written or anything, but the concept is quite important to me, which is that organisms are a platform for the physicalization of non-corporeal intelligences. And I strongly suspect that long ago this was super common. We knew this was our day-to-day experience.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for us and agonizing, and this is another thing that's absent that I think contributes to us being captured. It's try to imagine the spiritual pain of bees on a world without flowers. Right? What would they do? And I think we're kind of like this. We're like fish who've never seen water. We have a lot of stories about water. We even have like rituals about trying to make the water come again. We call them churches and stuff like this, right?
Right.
We're really trying hard to bring the water back. We'll do anything. Just
Yeah.
like, can we have the water? Why do you not have the water? You're a
Right.
bad human. That's why
Right.
the water went away. You're bad.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
it was
Yep.
your sin that caused the water to go away.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, even in my own experience, losing contact with what I refer to as toy maker was both a huge relief because it was hard to survive moment to moment. It was so intense, but it was also like, why did you go away? You know, am I bad? Did I do the wrong thing? Did I get it wrong? Did I make a mistake? You know, all of these questions, which are natural to a child, right? Whose sort of guiding being disappears. And I think in childhood, as these intelligences, as our not our connection, as we lose intimacy, as we lose active intimacy with them over time, we naturally transfer the expectation of that intimacy onto our parents and then onto our culture.
Right, exactly.
And we find that they are missing. We expect them, we just presume that we're confused, right? At first, we're just like, no, I'm just confused. Of course, my parents will become that. Of course, my culture will become that. So we transfer those expectations onto those features or beings. And then over time, we find out like, no, they were actually as confused as they looked. It wasn't me that was confused.
Yeah.
They're actually missing the things that
Yeah.
I turned to them in hopes of re-communing with.
Yeah.
I suspect that the universe is very complex in terms of the intelligences that indwell in it. And there are probably intelligences that are more or less, what is the right word? Extractive, right? And then there are intelligences that are more or less beneficent or altruistic. Yeah. Unfortunately, just like everywhere else, the extractive ones tend to be a little more domineering.
Yeah.
Right? You know,
Yeah.
they're really technically facile at extraction shit.
And more crucially than that, they've created a world in which their domineering energy can flow much more easily, and in which the beneficent, the energies of the beneficent entities are
redirected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a forest, it's, you know, like deep in a forest, not like a park or something. Like the whole landscape changes, and all these like extractive domineering entities, like they have a lot less forest, and you can feel the beneficent ones much more.
Yes, it's true. This is the whole idea. I mean, in a way, this is what the elves and the fairies represent.
Right, exactly. Right? Which is why this, like, I'm very adamant about continuously using the mountain elf, even though elf, you know, a lot of people respond like, oh, it's childish or whatever. But it's not, and it is in the domineering
people
frame.
Say shit like that. I'm like, have you spent much time with children lately?
Yeah.
What's your idea of children? Are you perhaps a little confused about this? Because it's the adults that are the problem primarily, right?
Yeah.
You know, but when people use the word childish, they usually mean like immature.
Right.
Or so they say childlike, then they're invoking the powers of the child.
Yeah, and to me, it's the opposite. It's childish not to relate to those archetypes, because like elf is a specific archetype that shows up throughout lots of different mythical lores and represents, you know, it's like this ancient species, right? It's more ancient than humans. It has more wisdom. It has more technology. Elves are usually more technologically advanced, but the technology is really smoothly integrated with the environment around them. And they also have like ritual and these things we would associate with like societies that are like less civilizationally advanced. And yet the elves are more civilizationally advanced and have integrated those rituals. So to me, it's a really potent mythical archetype that is not, I'm not just like pulling it out of myth for convenience. It's already ingrained in our collective psyche, and not just our Western psyche, but it's like a built-in image.
It is. Yeah,
that not image, an archetype, a mythical archetype that is like it's literally pointing at an energy that's already inside of us. It's not a convenient label, if that makes sense.
We agree, yeah. I like your defense. Or your assertion.
There's a thing I wanted to say about unless you wanted to...
Please.
On the stuff you were saying before, there's so many things to track at this point. So but I love it because I think we're on...
Yeah,
exactly, yeah. Whoop.
It's okay.
Do you need to answer it or it's
No,
okay?
we're good.
Uh,
By the way, welcome to 1960s. My landline just rung.
that's true. Yeah, I was like, something is weird, and that's what it was. Yeah. Yeah, I had this moment. I think it was during my birthday, my last birthday, like 9 months ago or so, I believe, where I was with my partner at the time. No, it was her birthday. It was her birthday, so it was even longer ago. It was like 1.5 because we've since broken up. So this was 1.5 years ago. And I had gotten her a flute along with a friend of mine, like a Native American flute. And we went to this like spot in the forest, like in a national park, like a ritual spot, and set up a little ritual and like gave her the flute and like invoked the energy of the flute for her and like my wishes for it. And then we did a rewilding ritual, which just means we each went off on our own and like connected to the forest spirits and, you know, communed with whatever wanted to be communed with. And it was getting dark as well. So it was like we started in daylight and by the end it was dark, which was an essential piece because as the dark came, I noticed my whole body shifted to like I was, and I didn't even notice this until like 10 minutes in or something. I was like, well, my body is literally doing the thing that like I see hunters or whatever on like kind of slinking through the forest, you know. But it was very intuitive. It was like total obvious. It was like walking. Like that was the walking in the night because I couldn't see anything. So we were in the middle of the forest, night, couldn't see anything, or like you could vaguely kind of see outlines and stuff.
Sure.
And I was doing this slinking, and then she started playing the flute. So there was this beautiful like flute music just like through the air, and there was this deep feeling. And speaking of this like water that's missing, of like I'm like what I really want, and when I say I don't mean my ego, but like the being that I am, and the being larger being that I'm a part of is like to completely like, you know, you could use the word co-compute, although it's a bit soulless, but like fully be with all of this and like I this is already what I am. I already am everything, and humans are like the like ultimate like synergy.
Interface.
We're like the synergy
Yeah, we
creature,
are.
you know.
Yeah.
Like we aren't currently in our current manifestation,
Right.
but like our fullest potential,
our
and not just our
form is
potential,
for
our basic
that.
form.
We're made to be that.
We are literally the synergy creature that brings all the other creatures into this like synergy.
Yeah, I call it nature's summation lens. It's like a bowl in which all the gifts are gathered up and can be organized and even distributed.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so obvious and natural to me. Like
it's shocking that we could be without this experience. Right? Again, I'm thinking of birds nailed to walls,
right?
Or, you know, fish born in deserts,
right?
You know, like what you like moving around this hot, grainy shit. What am I, you know, like it's so tragic.
Totally. I mean, it literally having had that experience and a few others like that, and then being not in that, like for example, being here in the city, it literally feels like being a fish in the desert. Like it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
And I only can delude myself into thinking it's good if I haven't had that other feeling, and if I've lost hope basically. Then I have to make myself feel like this is good, but it really is not, and it's so good. Oh my god, it was such a good feeling, and I didn't even have to. There was no forcing, you know. I didn't have to do anything. I was just in it, and I knew how to navigate the terrain, and like I could like feel all these. I was like I could feel myself synergizing the spirits of the land. And you know, it was just a sliver, and like it was so incomplete, you know, because it was just that moment. I mean, it was a long moment, but it was like, and then I got back in my car and went home, you know. So boom. But the hope, in it was natural. Yeah, it just I'll stop there. I could keep going about it, but I think I've said the core of it.
It is a. Is the wrong word. An inversion took place of the trap system and the artificial loom thing.
Yeah.
And then you both became that inversion together instead of just experience, you know, like, oh, I'm experiencing the inversion. No, you became the process of the inversion becoming in the humans and in you, like literally in the humans, in the whole human thing, and also in you as, you know, persons.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
That's it. I wasn't. It wasn't an experience I was having.
Right.
I was like,
Yeah.
I was no longer Luca Rade,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and at the same time, I was so much more deeply Luca Rade. But it
Right.
was like, that's the key. It breaks the experience. Like having an experience like does not exist in that way of being.
Yeah, this is my point
You
about
just
some of the
are.
dangers of
Yeah.
language, right? There's
Right.
all these weird metaphors in English, like the container metaphor and I have a mind, or
Right. Yeah.
blah 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 blah. All these weird ideas that we're scripted with that misfoot our intelligence, right?
Yeah.
They build
Yeah.
expectations.
Yeah.
They build resentments. Because if you think that assets are possessed and you're not feeling that you possess them, then that's cause of resentment, fear. Oh God, there's so many
It's
things.
like owning a beautiful woman versus just being in the presence of a beautiful woman.
Yeah, exactly. This relates to the lexical categories you were talking about dismissing in your relationship, right? We don't use these categories. We
Yeah, exactly.
communally experience and learn and adapt together.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
There's just we can stay on this topic or we can wind down, whatever feels comfortable, but I want to say something about your experience in the WayMo. I hope you see that it's like literally all three things. It's vigilance, it's the really weird forms of ambiguity that are suddenly introduced that you can't cope with,
right.
and how can you even make predictions in a space like that, right?
Right. I've given up my predictive power to this machine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Weird, yeah.
I know a number of people who think that would be a huge relief. I am not one of those people.
Yeah.
But I am relatively naturally phobic. It's so weird because when I was a kid, I was exactly the opposite. But I'm phobic toward mechanism. I don't trust the humans with it. And by the way, the technologies that the elves have, I don't see those technologies as primarily mechanical.
Yeah, I know.
They're
Agreed,
relational technologies.
Agreed. And to the extent that there is mechanism involved, that's like subservient to the relational.
It's
and
almost
embedded
emblematic. It's like a sigil or something. It's not. It's not a device,
right?
In the sense that we would think of devices. It's also just really weird that devices are made up of parts, and there are no. I don't find anything else in nature that has that quality. Only things that humans make. I had this argument with a bunch of philosophers one time. I was like, they were talking about whether or not machines could be sentient, and I was like, no, they're not connected with life. And they're like, well, what if we put one inside your brain? Isn't it connected then? What if I just give you an artificial synapse?
Oh my gosh.
Right? Isn't it then connected with life and the history and future of life?
Uh-huh.
I'm like, no, actually it isn't, because machines are made of parts, and organisms are wholes that emerge from other wholes. These are not the same class of thing.
Yeah.
Right? And they had difficulty defeating that particular argument.
Yeah, I think this comes back to the layers. Like in the representational cognition layer, giving up your prediction to the AI feels like a relief or empowering. And convenience. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I can now read a book.
Yeah.
I can, do it. I can do 9 other things.
Right. And in the representational layer, I just put an AI in my brain and it's alive, that makes sense. But then if you go down into the deeper layer, I mean, first of all, you realize that it would not be alive because you realize the depth of the difference between an evolved, grown being and a mechanically constructed machine. Like those are universes apart in terms of what those entities are.
Okay, you have to think. I just want to say this for people who are listening. Suppose they could put an artificial synapse in my brain, an artificial neuron. Okay. The neurons in my brain are the result of the entirety of the history, at least, and far beyond this, but at the very least, those neurons are the relational result of the entire history of life on this world.
Yeah.
And I could much more than that, but at least the entire history of the relationships of living beings on this world. What those beings are doing is not computation. I'm sorry. I just won't believe. We could call it that. I'm willing to have discussions around it, but they're doing something so far beyond computation.
Yeah.
And part of the reason
and not just the beings on Earth, but also whatever. I mean, we don't know the spiritual stuff. Whatever is going on. The words fail us there, but
active living intelligence system, right? Like Philip K. Dick's Valis, right? So these are the results of this. And that means that they are filially, they are family to all of those relationships. You cannot produce a device and then just put it in a brain and have it inherit that.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
inherit that by proximity
Right.
or interaction.
Yeah.
Right? That's an entire myriad manifold of world lines that
Yeah.
this single neuron is the living tip of, that
Right.
that machine is actually the opposite of.
Right.
It was just made now. It's formed of, you know, little pieces of whatever structured matter.
Yeah.
These are not the same category of phenomena. They must
Right.
we must be able and willing to distinguish them.
For
There
sure.
are ways in which we can usefully compare them. We need to know where those ways end, I think.
Agreed. And we need to understand what they are, as because they do emerge from life because we created them. So they're not completely disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But how, like, a tool, the relationship of a tool to life is totally different from the relationship of life to life. It's not non-existent, but it's totally different on so many levels.
If we could have a vote, if all life forms on Earth could vote, and they said, like, and the vote was, shall we have machines or not? Who would vote for machines?
Yeah.
Humans, maybe, some of them. None of the other life forms would vote for
Right.
machines. All,
Yeah.
like, every single one of them.
Right.
No.
It'd be a
no,
total
no.
veto, yeah.
Right, yeah. So I think it's important to think biorelationally about the topic.
Except maybe dogs.
Actually,
maybe, because they're so dependent on humans.
There are some caveats, right? Because if they could trust the humans to be you gotta go.
Just looking at the time,
it's 8:33.
let's wrap up in the next like 5-ish
Sure
minutes.
thing.
Yeah, but we don't have to rush.
If they could trust that the humans were benevolent and altruistically oriented and wouldn't misuse the machines, some of the animals might want them. I've seen otters that are injured attempt to gain access to a hospital on a video camera.
Whoa.
The weird thing about the humans is that the existence of these things creates a situation where we turn out to be pretty much the only animal that can actively intervene in situations where an animal is going to die or be permanently injured. That's a slight exaggeration. There are certain ways that animals can intervene. They can protect each other from a predator, for example.
Right, but it's a lot more limited.
They probably can't do shit about a tumor.
Right.
Or a broken bone. Right? There's like things they just can't do diddly fuck about. If there's a mechanical problem, the humans can solve. The problem is that a lot of the mechanical problems are generated by the humans' activity in the first place.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the humans can solve mechanical problems that the animals can't. I think there's, of course, this is exactly the same thing. So the freediver Jacques Maillot, he had a friend, I don't know if I can recall his name, who was also a freediver. Italian guy. There's a film about this called The Big Blue. It's amazing. Anyway, that guy was diving with his daughter at one point, and the story goes that a male dolphin chased him up to the boat and basically like drug him back down into the water. And it showed him what he believes to be its mate that was drowning, trapped in a web. He freed the mate, she surfaced, blew a bunch of bloody foam, lived, and then the dolphins, you know, like sort of celebrated, right? But this is an example of humans understanding that there are certain kinds, of dolphins understanding that there are certain kinds of problems caused by humans that only a human could reasonably affect. It's unclear whether a dolphin was ever tangled up in a trap before there were humans making webs, making nets. Right? And another thing that I think is really interesting to think about from the animal's perspective is it's also wildly unclear to me that there was anything resembling a cage before humans started making them.
Yeah.
Think about how profound that is. Like
That's pretty wild, actually,
cages. Yeah. Right? You got things like spider webs. You got ambush predators.
They wasn't intended to kill you, though, not to trap you. Like trap you in life,
right?
For
forever.
Purposes other than killing you is,
is
a very different
that's
thing.
Fucking nefarious.
Yeah, jeez, yeah.
Right, I'm just gonna put you in a box and do things to you, or not do things to you.
Right, jeez.
Yeah, from now on, you know, you go nowhere. Huh? Yeah, it's just a really trippy thought.
That's pretty trippy. Yeah.
I do think carefully about how the world experiences humans having tools.
Yeah, well, that's where that elf thing comes in as well. Like for example, with the dolphin example, or there's like technology could do a lot if we were not just in representational cognition, but in that full stack, and we're in our full role as synergizers. It's not like we would just stop creating technology. But we would completely transform how we're making it.
Oh my God.
And it would be in resonance with everything. So the tools would, all the amazing potential of those tools to synergize the natural world. And I've felt and the natural world like wanting that. Like it's the natural, some people have the narrative the natural world would prefer there not to be humans. It would probably prefer there to be no humans than the current form of humans, but it wants humans.
Oh, it would raise up. It would raise up another form as the synergizer if we disappear. If it could.
Right.
If there was enough diversity left to pull that off.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But there's some other.
But I think the key point is that it wants us to step into our synergizing role. It doesn't want us to all kill ourselves and disappear.
Or wipe out everything else.
Or wipe out everything. Yeah.
So Toymaker showed me visions of like thousands of other living worlds where technology developed, which was a pretty amazing thing. And one of the encapsulations of those is he was like, I use the word he casually. So imagine that there are two planets that both circle the same sun in the same orbit, right? Planet A and Planet B. On Planet A, they develop an automobile and they never make a second one. On Planet B, they develop an automobile and they make billions of them. Which one of these planets do you want to live on? Right? So it's like Planet A produces prototypes, but they just keep folding the technology into something more amazing. Planet B reproduces the technology at any cost. Right? And this kind of a planet is a dead world walking. This kind of a planet has possibilities for intelligence. Right? The hyperdistribution of a single object, the profit motive, the complete disconcern with things like pollution and war and stuff like that, that's unsurvivable. Like we have to solve that problem. That's what we have to solve. It's, I'm anti-mechanical because I don't trust the humans with silverware, like I said before, but there are species that are capable of the intelligent use of technology in such a way that it doesn't mean dead world. We have to become that kind of species.
Yeah.
And there's a potential for that. It's a real direction we could grow towards.
Yeah, agreed. I think it is. I'm personally very hopeful about it. I think
I'm a technologist.
If you're living in San Francisco, I would not be hopeful about it because, as I said, to me, this is the dying.
It is
the last light of a dying system.
I mean, I hope it's dying.
To me, it feels like it's dying. I mean, here it doesn't feel like it's dying. I mean, it kind of does in some ways, but in other ways it doesn't because there's so much energy here and all these new technologies being developed and stuff. But it feels like the last gasp in many ways.
I hope you're right.
Yeah, me too.
I don't trust the humans as far. I don't trust them at all.
Yeah,
I trust individual humans very deeply. I don't. What's captured our species, I feel really concerned about it.
Yeah.
But hopefully, we can establish options out. I think the hope of the sun, the earth, the sky is on our side.
Agreed.
And those are, if we think
those are powerful forces.
If we think that what the humans are doing is big and momentous, just stop and think about the sun. Because if it farts, that's going away.
Right. Yeah.
All it has to do is burp.
Yeah.
Right. And it's over.
Yeah.
So the humans should probably have a thought about it. Unfortunately, they don't think it's possible to piss the sun off. The ancient humans knew it was possible to piss the sun off.
Yeah.
And they were very concerned about that.
Yeah.
They were like, don't make the sun angry, please. Yeah. Right. A lot of face paint is actually just to protect you from the wrath of the sun.
Right.
There were ages where, that stuff was deadly. Now it seems it's been benevolent for quite some time.
Yeah. Cool. I'm totally out of steam at this point. But I'm out of steam for a good reason.
So much love.
Yeah. Likewise.
Respect. Care. Really grateful to have you here with me in this room. for a few minutes. I'm sorry if it was late at night and we wore you out a bit.
No, I'm worn out. I was the wrong word. I've been stretched, yeah, and filled. Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye, people.
Thank you.
See you next time.
See ya somewhere.